And welcome to the Kerry Barrett Show with my dear business coach and mentor, Katie McManus. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Sorry, we're a couple of minutes late. So if you're watching, you may know that I normally do my live stream on Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern. That's still happening this week, except Katie and I put our two genius brains together and figured we'd give you guys an extra dose, K squared, if you will, on a Thursday morning.
Well, and just a lesson that, like, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong.
It will go wrong.
Confusion, and like it happens to the best of us, even those of us who like go live all the time, we get it wrong. Yeah. And I think it's really important to share that with people, because when they're thinking about being on camera for the first time, these little things can just throw you off your game and make you feel panicked and rushed. And it's not a big deal.
No, it's not. And I'd like to point out, underscore, what a masterful segue you did just there. You took a moment. It's almost like somebody trained you. Although I know you say nobody has, but it's taking that moment that would ruffle people or rattle them a little bit and being able to turn it almost into like a teachable moment and then move on. That's the part that I think scares a lot of people.
Oh, well, I think people get in their own head. Like a mistake happens and then they go into judging themselves and they're like, oh my God, are other people noticing? Are they judging me? Yeah. And then they start thinking, oh my God, well, I'm probably not that good right now because I'm in my head. Like I'm probably really bad. And oh my God, I just messed up my words. And then it just kind of snowballs. And I've been live so much where I've made a mistake or plan just forgot what I was talking about while I was telling a side story that you just can't. You get desensitized to it over time.
Yeah. I think, it's interesting that you mentioned that. And then let's introduce you to the audience. For those of you who don't know who Katie is, she's like my godsend and my lifesaver, because I was in a major downward spiral when it comes to business stuff, which I'll be the first to admit I don't know anything about. But you mentioned that sort of desensitization, and if anybody has seen any of my posts or watched anything that I talk about on a semi-regular basis, it's that I used to be really, really awful at this. And there's still lots of stuff that I'm not confident at, but I've figured out sort of at least the stagecraft element of most things. When it comes to talking, I'm sort of past that stage, and I now am thinking more about the audience and how it helps them. But my point is, it took a lot of time piecing it together on my own and getting desensitized to it. And I will never forget, I was in a major market at this point. I wasn't in New York City, but I was in Philadelphia, and I was live on the air. So there's lots of people watching, many of whom are more than happy to share with you your awful mistakes on Twitter and to the boss via email, etc. And I was doing an interview with my co-anchor, hi, Lisa Marie, online, or not online, rather on air, I was sitting at the anchor desk, and I was ready to go with my next question, but I had prepared a series of questions in my mind, and I was going to go through them in this order, and that's what I was ready for. And when my co-anchor finished asking his question and the person had answered him, my co-anchor sort of looked at me, and for whatever reason at that point, everything that I had planned to say was gone.
Right.
And I had been so focused on that question that I literally could not think of another thing to say. And I just sort of sat back in my chair and went like this. Because I was out, like I was done. I knew I was defeated, but had I been able to sort of roll with the punches a little bit better at that point, that would have been a different story. It wasn't career ending by any stretch, but I guess my point here is saying, like, even if you've done this for a long time, even if you're Oprah, for example, the mistakes are still there. They still make the mistakes, but they don't get rattled by it, and they're able to move through it without, the entire audience knowing. So there will always be the fear and there will always be the mistakes.
Oh, 100%. And what do they say? New level, new devil, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? So like even news anchors go through it, even people who are on camera, live broadcast to major markets, like they're going to go through some variation of this.
So before we jump into sort of how like you pieced together your on-camera persona and the way that you talk and the way that you deliver, because you're very, very good at it.
Pause and say I love that like fancy title, on-camera persona.
You are. You do. You have one. You have. Listen, when we went through our personas, sort of in the beginning, it was like that. And I don't know if it was called celebrity, but it's that sort of understanding that when you're on camera or on a stage or wherever it is, there's an element of almost, I use the word showmanship. Probably a better word is stagecraft. You just understand how to keep the audience engaged from beginning to end. And they're not like zoned out looking at their watches. Like, when is this boring lady going to stop talking?
I don't know. Sometimes I drone on for quite a bit. Anyway.
Well, I like listening to you.
Thank you.
Well, so tell us what you do. I know what you do, but tell the audience.
My dog might go off in a second. Anyway, well, it's funny because like I was an audiovisual nerd in high school. Literally, I was in Harwich High School's News, Sports, Weather, and More. It was a weekly news show that we did on Fridays. And it was so cheesy. And it was basically my friend Madison and I just giggling and like getting some words out, but then giggling again. And then like interviewing people. Like our news segments were awful. We ripped off like the graphics from weather.com, and like we could never figure out the green screens are like clouds going this way. So I think I was able to kind of have this foundation really early on of it's not scary to be on television or on TV. And also I never actually watched myself, you know?
Yeah. Well, that may be a game changer.
Right. And it was only broadcast to a town that had like 7,000 residents.
Yeah.
Right? And like, there's only so many who are going to sit around and watch the cable access TV shows put on by the local high school. Right. But anyway, and it was always like the 80-year-old person in the grocery store was like, oh my God, I saw you on TV.
I love her.
Yeah, awesome. But anyway, fast forward starting a business, you know, and lives didn't exist when I was in high school, college, even my early 20s. Like this wouldn't
have this stuff. Yeah.
Like I wouldn't have been able to imagine what my work would look like today. It just didn't exist.
Yeah.
But anyway, the pandemic hit and I was building my business fairly successfully by networking in person because I'm an extrovert.
Yeah.
You know, I love going to networking parties and happy hours and all that stuff. But then the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And how do you network? How do you give people an experience of who you are? Which I think is incredibly important when you're starting a service-based business where you're basically selling a relationship with your expertise.
Right.
Right. Like people have to understand what it's like to be around you before they're comfortable to get on the phone with you often. And so my coach at the time was like, we'll go live. And I was like, doing what? Like,
I am alive. What do you mean?
I know, right? And I'm like, what would I talk about? And he literally said, just go on walks and like video yourself and just be like, oh my God, like, and just make up stuff. And I think I'd gone through Toastmasters and I'd done like, you know, public speaking classes because I used to be a terrible public speaker.
Right.
Like, stutter and stammer and sweat through things. And it was bad. But anyway, you know, just, and I had taken improv classes. And so I just kind of leaned into that.
Yeah.
And, you know, what I found is that, especially during the pandemic, people wanted someone to hang out with.
Yeah.
People were really lonely. And just like, you didn't even have to have anything to talk about really.
Totally. Yeah.
And people were like, thank you for going live. Cause like, I'm all alone and I had access to another human while you were on camera. And I realized like the bar was really low.
Yeah. It's a low bar to entry.
Yeah. And so then I started like kind of toying with, okay, well, what should I talk about that's relevant to my audience? And I realized really quick, like giving them solutions to their problems, it's not going to be helpful to them. Right. Because usually when someone's watching a live, like it's on their phone while they're doing dishes or they're making dinner or they're getting ready for bed or, you know, they're walking the dog. They're not sitting there and taking notes.
Right. It's kind of like a podcast.
Absolutely. But you know, what is valuable is like, while they're passively listening is hearing that they're not alone in their problems.
Yep.
that they're not alone wanting this thing that they think is completely out of their reach.
Yeah.
And being reassured or just like told for the first time that they're not alone. And there are lots of people out there who struggle with the same thing or want the same things.
Yeah.
And it's possible for them and it's possible for you.
Yeah. I that resonates with me so much because I think one of the things, you know, and I was on camera for a long time, 20 years prior to starting my business, the camera, the talking, all of that doesn't bother me anymore. But as a business coach, like when I reached out to you for help, I was like, am I really dumb? Are other people struggling with the same thing? Like I've been beaten down for 40 years. I can't imagine anybody else has made the stupid decisions that I have made. And it was really nice to hear you say, I think truthfully, like that's pretty much everybody does this same stuff. So you're okay. And it's actually not all that awkward. And guess what? There's a total path through it and I can help you get through it.
Yeah. Well, and also like, I know stories are so much worse than like what you've described. Like yours is not that impressive to be frank. Yeah. Oh, I'll tell you offline at some point. Sorry to tell a secret to the audience. I don't want to out anyone. You know what I mean?
Right. Hang out after this show is off.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, it's just but here's the thing. We all think that our problems are unique.
Yeah.
We're not that creative. You know?
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Justin.
You know, I was just looking at what Justin said. He says, I think most people are terrified of being on camera because they think people will judge them. Oh, people are judging you. Have no doubt. They are judging you 100% from beginning to end. And you may not even know them, or they may be people you work with. For some people, one audience is maybe worse than the other. Like I hate being judged by people I work with because then I feel like they don't want to work with me. But the total stranger, I have no problem with that. But my point, Justin, is absolutely people are judging you. It is being able to sort of compartmentalize that or not worry about it to the point where you are able to put the purpose ahead of that fear of being judged. I know you say there, no one really cares. They don't to a degree, but they are definitely, there's a judgment that is passing through their brains when they watch you. And it doesn't mean it's a bad one. She's really good, or he's really good, or she's not so good, or he's put on some weight, or whatever the judgment is. It is always coming, good or bad, but that's not the purpose.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, I love that you touched on that like judgment, we jump to judgment being bad.
Yeah.
You know, people are innocent all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, they're judged winners all the time. And yet we associate being judged with like, oh, I'm bad, I'm not worthy, people think I suck, all this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And a quick reminder to anybody who's watching, Lisa Marie and Justin, you've been prompt in the comments. If anybody else has a comment or a question, or even just some experience or anecdote that they want to share, please go ahead and put them in the comments and we'll share them if appropriate with the rest of the audience and answer the question if we can. But I want to sort of go back to something, Katie, that you and I were talking about a little bit before the show, which was, you know, one of the reasons I know you is because I found you on LinkedIn, and I found you on LinkedIn because you put out a lot of video content, and I wasn't quite ready to work with you when I first met you, but a couple years down the road, I saw another post of yours on video, and I was like, damn, she is speaking my language. I have to reach out to her.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned that like you sort of, you're compelling to watch, and you sort of piecemealed the different elements of that together. And it took a while to get there. Yeah.
It took a long time. It took years, honestly. Yeah. I mean, I don't, it's funny. I don't actually go and watch video except for like reels and TikToks, long-term video online. I'm not watching it.
Yeah. Like YouTube and stuff.
I don't watch it. I don't watch it. Like occasionally I'll have something on the background if someone like really pushes me, but I'm a firm believer that we have to create content for how other people perceive us.
Yeah.
Like I'm a reader, so I like writing content also, but you know, long form, I don't watch it. So I don't have anything to compare. I think that helps though, because I don't have anything to compare myself up against.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
I also think it's interesting. I was reading an article the other day. You mentioned, and I know we're sort of bouncing all over the place here, but but guide me. No, one of the things that I read an article about proxemics, and it's basically how video allows you that proxemics is space, really, right?
Yeah.
So, personal space and space in a crowd. And if you're at the grocery store, somebody may be 6 inches behind you and they're in your personal space. Video replicates, when it's done properly, the proxemics that you might have when you're meeting somebody in person. So for me, I'm about 1.5 feet away from my camera. You're probably somewhere in that range as well. So we're 3 feet-ish when we look at one another apart. And that sort of replicates the way we would talk to one another if we were in, let's say, a networking meeting or a networking group. And while one-on-one and in person may be awesome, video is the next best thing. And it allows us to go to networking groups that are not in driving distance from us. It allows us to sort of expand beyond those geographic constraints those physical constraints or boundaries that we might normally find ourselves in. And so when people talk about why should I do video, my business is not necessarily, I'm a lawyer, or I'm, a chief distribution officer at an insurance firm or company, why do I need to be doing video? Well, it's because ultimately whoever is working with you, you're the person that they're going to be working with, and you can convey so much more when you're on a camera or you're on a stage, digital or physical stage, than you can by writing copy. Copy is also important. You can get down into details that you can't get into really on video before people's eyes glaze over. But in terms of creating that connection, there's nothing that can beat video aside from a one-on-one.
Well, and it's night and day. It's almost like when you're texting with a friend to figure out where you want to go for dinner versus just hopping on the phone and having a phone call. Like, there's so many ways to start getting in your head about, are they mad at me? Like, I don't know. I want tacos. They don't seem excited about tacos. Oh God. Do they are they anti-tacos? Oh God, am I going to make a miserable night for them? Versus getting on the phone and being able to read their energy.
Yeah.
Like, energy does so much for it. And I think what's the percentage, like 80% of human communication is nonverbal.
Yeah.
Right. And like, obviously you can't see my whole body here, but you can see like enough to be able to read,
your background. Like it tells me something about you, all of that stuff.
Oh, I get so nosy about people's houses.
Oh yeah. I do like looking in the back.
Your living room is always so tidy. And I'm always like, oh God, like,
oh, well, so here's another challenge of video. There's no context outside of this little box. Right. So it's a total shit show if you just step out of frame.
You guys can, this is messy, but like, you guys cannot see my desk where the computer is. It's awful.
I've been there, done that. It's all right. As long as it's slightly out of frame, I'm okay with it. It's probably like some sort of metaphor for my mind, but whatever.
Yeah. But like, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like, I've had this whole journey of like just trial and error and seeing like, oh God, that was embarrassing. Oh, cool. This works. I'm curious for you, what was your process, both learning how to be on television and also, doing lives for your own business?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I'll abridge this story. So when I was a pre-veterinary medicine major, mostly because like I am an introvert. I don't like going to networking meetings. I always feel a little bit insecure. I hated speaking on a stage. You would not catch me dead speaking on a stage. And so I was about 2 years or so into my veterinary medicine academic career when organic chemistry put like a very swift end to those lifelong dreams. And I took some time off, and I knew that I wanted to go into some arena that did not have any science involved in it anymore. And my school started up this communications program. It was really broad. It was, speech and communications and language pathology and business community. It was broad. and so I knew I'd be able to find something likely that I could use to make a living, and I wouldn't, have organic chem, and I'd have to somehow maybe start to get my arms around this fear I had of public speaking. One thing I will say is that I think has worked in my favor is, despite being terrified, I've never backed away from a challenge. I've always looked at challenge as something that's just part of getting to the next step, whether it was, getting married to my husband, who was in the military and really affected my opportunities to look for a job, or whether it was trying to overcome public speaking, or any number of things.
Yeah.
My fears of public speaking. And so that has worked in my favor. Not that I'm always confident all the time. I'm not by a long shot, but I just know that I want to do the thing. The wanting to do it is bigger than the fear of doing it.
Right.
And so I got an internship, and at a TV station when I was an undergrad, and I really fell in love with like the storytelling and just sort of the excitement of it all. I didn't want to sit in an office all day. And so then I had to learn how to actually not only just get like away from the fear, but also be good enough that somebody would pay me, because now like the food in my belly and the roof over my head was going to depend on me being able to communicate well.
Right.
And that process was a long one, right? I went to grad school, and then I did 2 more internships, and then I got my first job in a really tiny market where I made lots of terrible mistakes to a smaller audience than New York. And we had coaches that would come in, and we had consultants, and I would review my video every day, and I still hate doing that. And then I sort of put together a process. I didn't recognize it that way at the time, but really it started with me taking one step on the anchor desk every day that put me out of my comfort zone. And in the beginning, it was very, very basic. It was like, you are going to stop looking like your hands are glued to the desk, and you are going to use them to influence and communicate. Yeah. It would be those tiny little baby steps. And then when I launched my business, I already had this sort of like brand as a video person. So I was able to build my business brand on the back of being able to speak and getting over that fear, and now having a process. So I condensed what took me 15 years to figure out into, 15 weeks or less. And while everything is sort of bespoke to what the client needs, there's a basic level of sort of like diagnostic. What is the problem? How does it show up? Where does it come from? Who are you? Now let's bring all these pieces together into putting together your plan for getting from where you are to where you want to be. And why do you want to be here? Is it you want more leadership skills? Is it you want greater influence? Is it you need to create marketing and sales collateral? Is it you are in a corporation and you're expected to do virtual town halls or speaking engagements? Whatever it is, let's talk about that and look at where your skills are lacking in getting you to this space.
Right. Right.
We bring all of that together.
Well, I actually have a question, and it's kind of leading. So, just for a point. Hi, David. So when you were studying communications in college, how much of that has changed over the last 15, 20 years?
Gosh, tons. I mean, gobs. What I learned academically in college is I rarely touch on it. I mean, it provided a good foundation. I understand, persuasive argument and those sorts of, basics and how to communicate in a generally effective manner. But in terms of being compelling on this, so I'll give you an example. Yeah. When you go to college and you take a public speaking course, and they teach you how to make a persuasive argument, they don't teach you how to deliver a persuasive speech. They teach you like, here's what makes a persuasive speech. You start out with this, then you add a hypothesis, then you back it up with these 3 points, and then you come to a conclusion, and then you tell them what you told them. Well, that's great. But if I'm scared to tell it to you and you can tell that I'm scared, how persuasive is that actually going to be? Not very persuasive.
Right.
So while I understand the constructs and the format, everything I've learned about delivery, right? The improv classes that I took when I was a news anchor, so I could hopefully avoid that awkward crosstalk that you see the anchors do. Oh, that's right, Bob. It is, but that shit. All of those things I lean so much more heavily on to those things that I learned. And then especially so how I deployed them. And in the news industry, it follows it's very parallel to business communications and business video, right? We want short, we want quick, it should be educational, but it also should be entertaining. It's got to sell you on the subject and it's got to hold you from beginning to end, whether it's a 45-second, voiceover or it's a 30-minute breaking news segment.
Right. Well, and so yes. And my point is, like, so many people go into it thinking, well, it's not that hard. I should be able to do this. Like, I can speak publicly. I'm good. Like, there are lots of lawyers who are really good in court, for instance. And yet they get they have this standard for, I should be able to do this. And then they do it and they're like, that was not good.
No. Yeah.
Right? Because like the thing that you learned, or maybe some of the feedback you got really early on is out of date now.
Yeah.
And it was never complete back then. It's one of the reasons why it's so helpful to work with a coach who not only has gone through it all themselves, but like knows how to coach you through being better. And knows exactly what is going to get you to be better.
It really is interesting. I was working with, and I won't be specific, but David, this isn't you, a legal team a while back, and they are incredibly worked with a number of them, but this group in particular, very, very forward in their industry. Like, they're world-renowned attorneys, and they are pit bulls in the courtroom, but there's a different set of parameters when it comes to, we were creating videos, when it comes to being on video. And the piece that's most often missing, and that I think is scariest for people, is that video is not a virtual white paper. So you'll never like get on a camera and start, brain dumping a bunch of data or statistics, not if you're doing it right anyway, but we feel very comfortable. We all like to feel that we're very data driven, but it's not the most data heavy mind. It's not the greatest mind in the industry that is compelling on camera. It is the one who's interesting. It is the one who is memorable. It is the one who is personable. And you may be a pit bull in the courtroom, but you can bring that element of yourself and these other things that make you, good on camera or great on your, external videos or your internal company communications or whatever it is. You can bring those two things together. You can be authentic and also be interesting and memorable and warm, but those things rely on personality to some degree. And that feels a lot slipperier for most of us than data. That feels a lot scarier, because what if they don't like my personality? Or what if I'm boring? Or what if I'm this? Or what if I'm that? We don't have any, it's not an A equals B sort of situation. Like, this feels a lot more nebulous and vague. Like, how do I make people like me? It's kind of what that comes down to.
Yeah. Well, and I can't help but think of Will Ferrell, because for the longest time when he was, interviewed by like Tonight Show, late night, TV things, he was in character. He was not comfortable just going and being Will Ferrell.
Nope.
He could go and be the elf, and he could be any number of things. I'm forgetting.
Ricky Bobby.
Ricky Bobby, yeah. He was,
I don't know what to do with my hands.
Exactly. Brother from Step Brothers. But like, he doesn't have that comfort level, and he's an actor.
Yeah.
He literally gets paid millions of dollars to be on camera constantly. And I think for especially people like lawyers, like, they go and they deliver this performance in a very specific setting, and yet on camera, like, they have to be themselves. And who is that? And it opens you up to so much more judgment.
Yeah, we get used to, and the way that I see it come across sometimes, and this is not just applicable. We're not beating up on lawyers. This is applicable. I find it's applicable to a lot of, I'm painting with a broad brush here, but it applies generally more often to higher level executives and those who are in more, I call them stoic spaces, finance, insurance, pharma to some degree, depending on where you work in that. And it's because there's a equation or a formula that's always been applied to the way those people show up. And the way that they showed up was usually in front of clients, people who already were clients, either on the phone or in person. And they had, they were taking care of business. Well, now the way that you bring those clients in is oftentimes through the things that you're putting out, right? Podcasts and live streams and sales videos and marketing videos. And it may be virtual client calls, and you're establishing leadership through your town halls and your hybrid events and all that other stuff. And so when you have to now step outside of that equation or formula that you are used to following, it's scary because the vast majority of the people who are in those spaces have not stepped outside of that formula or equation. And so it feels like very scary to be at the tip of the spear, but I promise you, that's the way all of it's going. Like that, my daughter, she doesn't Google anything anymore. She YouTubes it.
Right.
She wants to know about a company or a brand. She doesn't Google them. She puts their search in YouTube. Now, you may not be searching on YouTube as a business owner, maybe you're searching on LinkedIn, but you're watching videos. And if you're in the legal industry, again, if you're wanting to justify your $2,500 an hour rates, your clients expect you to be thought leaders. They need something to justify that. And so they need to see you there. You need to be the leader in the industry, and you don't get that sitting at your desk and making phone calls.
Yeah.
But you're at the tip of the spear, and it's scary because in order to stand out, you got to do something different. And that feels really vulnerable. Like it feels very, very scary.
Well, I also imagine these people that are highly successful, they probably have a 22-year-old daughter or son who is really interested in social media. And they're like, Mom, Dad, you're not just competing with other lawyers. You're competing with Netflix and all of the entertaining shit on the internet. And they're like, what? So I don't just have to know the stuff. I also have to be entertaining. Like, what? How do I make this entertaining? Especially if it's something that's kind of like, they know it's boring to other people.
Right. But you know what's interesting? I would also say, if you're willing to step outside of that sort of formulaic way that everybody has always been, you can be interesting, especially to somebody who is interested in what you're doing. Like people say, oh gosh, what I do is so boring. And I'm like, well, you do this. Who do you work with? This person. They don't think it's boring, right? I mean, they're interested in what you do because you're doing it for them, and they want to make sure you're doing it well and that you know what you're talking about, and that you're, whether it's a coach or you're in, insurance, or you are creating new products for a cosmetics company, whatever it is, they want to know that they're interested in what you're saying. You can be a scientist, and people still want to know.
Oh, 100%. There's a lawyer on TikTok. I'm forgetting her name, but she reads like ridiculous transcripts. Like she acts them out in a funny voice.
Like courtroom transcripts?
Yeah.
Okay.
But like ridiculous things where like the person on the stand is like accidentally admitting to stuff, and or like they made they answered with something really stupid, or the cross-examiner, asked a really stupid question.
Yeah.
And yeah, but it's like, it's entertaining. It has nothing to do with what she does in her job.
Right.
But you have it in your mind. She's a lawyer.
Yeah.
You think, okay, well, maybe I'll reach out to her and see if her law firm can handle my thing, because like you feel like you have this relationship with her.
Yeah. Or somebody who has a podcast or has a live stream or has an event an event planner that they're trying to get somebody they see that TikTok and they're like, that person is different from every other lawyer that I see. I want that person to speak at my event, or I want that person on my podcast. And then that content puts you in front of your potential clients or whatever. It's not just that a client may see you, it's that video opportunity or whatever it is where you're in front of the lens leads to so many other, if you do it right, so many other visibility opportunities. I would say when I first started, and I didn't even have an offer at that point. I didn't even know I needed an offer. Let's be honest.
There are plenty.
But people knew me from TV, and they would say, "Do you want to like be on my podcast, or can you come speak at my event?" And I said yes to every single thing, and I was still figuring it out. But then from those events, somebody would come up to me and be like, "I need help with blah. Can you do blah?" And because I didn't really have an offer and I didn't exactly know what I was going to be doing in my business, I could do, blah. And so then I did it. And that's how I then would bring clients in. It's also how in the early stages of my business, I figured out what I liked, what I didn't like, what took me a long time to do, what I could do in my sleep, etc.
Yeah. I mean, that trial and error is so valuable. I did it with my niche, started off as a dating coach for men and then accidentally became a dating coach for women.
That's another whole episode. Like, I really need to hear about it.
But to the point is like, even the visibility that I was doing when I was a dating coach for men, even though I got like one dude to sign up for it and a bunch of women, that visibility, like there are people who started following me then who've been my clients since then.
Yeah.
In every iteration of what I've done, from dating coaching to leadership development to, business strategy to, my podcast, all this stuff. Like there's something about your personal brand that comes across when you're on video. It really doesn't matter what you're talking about. People
100%
decide they like you and they want to be in your world. And then once you come out with something that's relevant to them, they're like, oh, I want to buy that from you.
Yeah. I remember you from this, or you've stayed top of mind, or they just trust you and they have an idea of what it's going to be like to work with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
100%.
So I do have to ask, what made you switch from being a dating coach into a business coach?
Honestly, so I'm a big believer that the universe is like a big dance. And if you're with the wrong partner, the universe will just correct you to another partner.
Yeah.
Right. So I was like, okay, cool. I live in San Francisco. Dating is miserable here. And honestly, it's kind of selfish. I was like, I'm going to fix the men. I'm going to fix the men for all of womankind, all of straight womankind here. Like they need our help. They were not interested in help, but all the women were. So I started off as a dating coach for men, and then I got all female clients pretty much. And so I was like, okay, I'm a dating coach for women. And then everyone except for one of my female clients needed help with like how they were at work. Cause like they were taking on more projects. They were bad at setting boundaries. They were working late. Like every way that they were being at work was getting in the way of them even having a personal life, much less a relationship. And so I realized, okay, well, maybe I'm doing leadership development because I kind of liked it better. Like the one person I had who was like consistently talking about dating, I got kind of bored.
Yeah.
So I went and I got more training and started building an executive training or executive coaching and leadership training company, and started getting clients and started signing, corporate companies. And my coaching friends were like, wait a minute, how did you do that? Yeah. And I just took for granted that I had this background in sales and marketing. And I just, figured everyone knew how to do this stuff.
Yeah.
And so I started showing them and teaching them how to run a sales call and deal with objections and how to introduce themselves and all this stuff. And they started getting clients, and then they started referring me clients to do that. Mm-hmm. So it was honestly, I tripped and fell into it. And I discovered I just loved it so much more than doing leadership development.
Yeah.
And of course teaching people like alchemy, how do you turn words into money versus how do you give this person who works for you, who you're not really crazy about having on your team, how do you give them constructive feedback so they feel motivated, but you also don't sound like a dick? Like,
or get hit with a lawsuit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that doesn't sound very fun.
No. This is way more fun. But like, it's, I think also on video, when you're learning to be on video and you're trial and erroring it, you're gonna make mistakes and you're kind of gonna find your sweet spot over time.
Yeah.
And it's gonna evolve and you can't predict where it's gonna go.
100%. And I'll underscore that. And I know we're going to wrap up soon. But it is interesting. There is, people talk about, don't get hindered by perfection because it'll stop you from moving forward. And that is 100% true. You just, at some point, you got to do the things in order to like figure out how to finesse and fine tune, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't mean that you go on to a live stream or a client pitch or an investor pitch and just like wing it the entire way through. That's not what we mean by like doing the thing and not worrying about being perfect. You can't ramble. You have to make sense. You should be compelling. But I will say this, and I think this is sort of like my final big epiphany moment when I was working in the news industry. And it was again in Philadelphia before I headed up to New York City. And I, at that point, could read a technically perfect show, meaning I could say all the words with perfect diction, and I had the right pauses, and I had the right look, and I could do non-awkward chit chat, even if it wasn't really compelling at that point. But that, and I'm going to put the word perfection in quotes because there's always mistakes, but I could do a technically, again, air quotes, perfect show. Nobody liked me.
Right.
I don't mean the people that I work with. I meant like the audience would send, I'm being a little bit dramatic, but why is your new anchor so cold? Or why is I can't connect with her because I was so focused on doing the show perfectly and getting all the reads right that I wasn't thinking about making a connection with the audience. And that means knowing how to roll with things when I make a mistake, or being able to interject humor and keep who I was on the air as sort of same, minus the curse words, as the person that I was off the air.
Yeah.
And when I was finally able to like sort of shed those boundaries, and yes, my ability to host a morning show on a completely wacky 6-hour program is different than somebody perhaps in insurance or finance creating a video. My point is, if you just focus on technically saying the words correct, your audience is not, you have to be talking to something about something that they are already insanely highly invested in for you to be memorable. Because if you're not, and you're just technically perfect, you're not memorable, they're not interested, you don't come across as real, and they can't connect with you. And imagine if you took that concept, you're unrelatable, they can't connect with you, you're not memorable, and you just moved it into an in-person networking environment. You wouldn't expect to get anything out of it. It's the same with video, right? You have to be able to try and bring all yourself. And I don't mean I need to know that you had IBS or whatever is good. Like, I just mean you have to, but feel free to share that if you'd like to as well. I talked about all kinds of stuff when I was pregnant on the air. By the way, never ask a woman if she's pregnant unless you see her feet in the stirrups and she's crowning. That's
God. Yeah.
But, I learned to shed that other sort, like those trappings of I have to fit into this certain thing. And it's still scary sometimes, but when I do it, I find that I am more memorable and people are able to connect. And even if it's like 3 or 4 years down the road, sometimes somebody will reach out and they'll be like, we had a virtual meeting once and it wasn't the right time, but I remember you and now I need this thing, right? Because they probably talked to a lot of other people who did the same thing, but they didn't make a similar impression. I'm not perfect and I don't do everything right, but I'm telling you that element is one that's often forgotten, and its importance can't be overstated.
Yeah. Well, and it underlines the importance of getting coaching through this. Cause I think for a lot of people whose career is not based around being on camera, but they're having to do it more and more.
Yeah.
There's this underlying belief that they're not worthy. They're not inherently Like there's so many like
that you shouldn't ask for attention. My mom always told me I should be quiet and that it was obnoxious for me to like, there's so much baggage.
Oh my God. And you don't realize it until you're doing it, that this baggage is holding you back, and having a coach who can be like, hey, what is going on here? What are you afraid of?
Yeah.
It's so impactful because it becomes almost a therapy session. It's not therapy, but it becomes very therapeutic, and it really helps you understand that you are worth paying attention to, that you can take up space, you can be loud and big and all the things. And it's really a transformational experience.
Yeah. It goes from like, first we got to figure out the mindset, take care of those things, and then teach you the stagecraft. Right. So how all the other things that make somebody compelling on camera outside of their personality, right? You can't be monotone and talk like this and expect somebody, right? All those things.
Totally.
And then now let's talk about how to bring those two things together so you can put the audience first, and you can be entertaining and educational and transform the way that they think about their problem or whatever it is. And you will find that once you're able to sort of get through the basics of mindset and stagecraft or showmanship, for lack of a better word, and think about the audience, all this other stuff begins to snowball on itself. It begins to naturally elevate. You have the basics. Now you're thinking about the audience, and mindset and stagecraft come together so that you can serve the audience best. Like, I want to serve the audience in this 30-minute virtual presentation. So I'm thinking about them. How can I list these things so that they remember them? I remember that I need to pause a little bit between each thing that I say so they can remember them. It all just begins to come together, and you feed off the audience, and you know what works, and then you build your skills from there.
Right.
Yeah.
Katie, so many pieces. I'm so excited.
I know. I appreciate you sharing all your little gems and nuggets with us.
Thank you. This has been so much fun. We have to do this again.
I would, you know what? I was thinking as we were talking, like, we could really do this weekly. I won't sign you up for that yet, but we could.
Well, I go live enough. Like, we can absolutely set something regular up. It'd be super fun.
We should. I absolutely. You should put your is there a link or anything you want to put in the comments for people to check out? I'll share it with them. Your website or something. I mean, you have Katie's profile, so by all means, go ahead and click on that and check her out. I will sing her praises from the mountaintop. Many a day have passed since I started working with her that she gets a panicked text or email or like the most basic and ridiculous question. Like, do I sign, warm regards or just regards? Like,
it's not just you. It's not just you. And honestly, like, my whole approach with my clients is reach out to me whenever you feel stuck. Yeah. And the clients who reach out to me the most are the ones who end up being the most successful.
Yeah.
So
good. Well,
I know.
So on my way.
Not letting me comment anything, but again, like, my thing is linked. If you want to find me, you can find me.
Absolutely. And I just did a quick comment. I have a free video. It's called your Spotlight Scan, a video assessment where I'll give you a quick audit on your on-camera persona. So if you feel like checking that out, click on the link that's in the comments. Katie, you're the best.
Oh my God, this is so much fun. I know you have a call, so I'll let you go, but
I have a call with you tomorrow, I think. So I'm looking forward to that. Awesome. And to the audience, thank you for joining us. If you had an aha moment, let us know in the comments, because that's super helpful. We can make sure that we dive into those moments a little bit deeper next time that we chat. But thank you for being here, and I will see the audience for my live stream on Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern.
And I'll see you tomorrow. Okay.
All right. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.